The whirring of servos and the occasional puff of steam punctuated the otherwise peaceful afternoon in Daniel Wren's Valley workshop. Nestled between the towering mountains that sheltered Meridian Colony, the last truly free human settlement, the workshop was Daniel's sanctuary. Solar panels glinted on the sloped roof, capturing the warm light of the twin suns of Kepler 452b, affectionately nicknamed Earth's cousin by the colonists who had made it their home 3 generations ago. Daniel wiped sweat from his brow with a rag that had seen better days, leaving a smudge of machine oil across his forehead. The irrigation pump he was repairing was nearly complete. It would serve the eastern agricultural sector well through the coming dry season. He took pride in his work, in the way his hands could coax life back into machinery others deemed beyond repair. His reputation as the colony's most skilled engineer had spread even beyond human circles, which explained his unusual friendship with Vark. The sound of approaching footsteps made Daniel look up. A smile broke across his face as he recognized the distinctive 6-legged gait of his Hralvak friend. Vark's exoskeleton gleamed iridescent blue in the afternoon light, his 4 primary arms gesticulating excitedly as he approached. The 2 smaller utility arms remained folded neatly against his thorax. "Daniel, friend!" Vark's translator device converted his clicking mandible language into the flat tones of standard English. "I bring auspicious news and honorable gift." Daniel set down his tools and stepped out from under the irrigation pump. "Vark, wasn't expecting you until next week." He extended his hand in the human greeting he'd taught his alien friend, and Vark extended one of his upper appendages, mimicking the handshake with careful precision. Opportunity arose for earlier transit, could not delay when perfect gift was located. Vark's compound eyes seemed to gleam with what Daniel had learned to recognize as excitement. "You saved my vessel and life during Ion Storm. Debt must be repaid with gift of equivalent value." Daniel sighed, having had this conversation many times before. "Vark, I've told you, friendship doesn't work that way for humans. You don't owe me anything. Hralvak honor demands balance in all exchanges." Vark's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. 3 solar cycles have passed. Debt grows with time. Now perfect gift found. It was then that Daniel noticed something, or rather someone, standing motionless behind Vark. A young woman with long auburn hair and unnaturally pale skin waited with eyes downcast. She wore nothing but a thin, translucent membrane that barely preserved modesty, revealing intricate blue markings across her shoulders and down her spine. Daniel felt his stomach knot as recognition dawned. "Vark," he said slowly, "please tell me that's not what I think it is." "Behold," Vark stepped aside, gesturing with his upper arms. "Consent slave, highest quality. Genetically engineered for perfect compliance and satisfaction. No expense spared. Debt will be balanced." The woman didn't move or react to being discussed. She simply stood, breathing shallowly, eyes fixed on the ground. Daniel knew about the galactic consensus and their consent slaves, bioengineered humans designed with neural modifications that forced them to obey and find pleasure in submission. The practice was legal in most of the galaxy, but banned in Earth's colonies. It was one of the many reasons humans had established frontier settlements like Meridian, to preserve values the wider galactic community had abandoned. "Her designation is Inara," Vark continued proudly. "Intelligence enhancement, artistic aptitudes, engineered for aesthetic perfection and adaptability to owner preferences. Cost equivalent to small interstellar vessel." Daniel felt sick. He'd heard of these beings, but had never seen one in person. Earth had fought wars over this practice before, withdrawing from wider galactic politics altogether. "Vark," Daniel said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "I can't accept this. Person as a gift. Humans on Meridian don't keep slaves." Vark's antennae twitched in confusion. "Not slave in primitive sense. Consent slave. Neural programming ensures true desire to serve. No suffering possible. She experiences only fulfillment when pleasing owner. That's not consent, Daniel said sharply. It's just more sophisticated coercion. The woman, Inara, hadn't moved or shown any reaction to the conversation. Her stillness was unsettling, almost doll-like. Daniel could see her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. But otherwise, she might have been a statue. Demonstrate, Vark said, turning to Inara. Inara, new master is Daniel Wren. Acknowledge. For the first time, Inara raised her eyes. They were a startling violet, another sign of genetic manipulation. I acknowledge Daniel Wren as my master and purpose, she said, her voice melodious but devoid of any emotion. I exist to please and serve Master Daniel in all ways he desires. Daniel took an involuntary step back. Stop! Please stop this! Vark's confusion was evident in the rapid clicking of his mandibles. Perhaps demonstration of capabilities required? Inara, remove... No! Daniel interrupted forcefully. He looked around frantically, then grabbed a clean work tunic hanging from a nearby hook. Without thinking further, he stepped forward and draped the garment over Inara's shoulders. The simple act seemed to trigger something unexpected. Inara's eyes widened slightly, her fingers reaching up to touch the rough fabric with something like wonder. For just a moment, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed her face. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. Vark's reaction was immediate and explosive. What are you doing? The translator couldn't fully convey the distress in his clicks, but his body language, antennae flat against his head, all 6 arms gesticulating wildly, made his agitation clear. Covering consent slave is deep insult, negates purpose, like putting container over light source. Daniel stood his ground. On Meridian, people wear clothes. All people. Not people, property, Vark insisted, his agitation growing. Expensive, valuable property now diminished. As they argued, neither immediately noticed the change in Inara. She had slipped her arms into the sleeves of the tunic, wrapping it around herself fully. Her hands stroked the fabric with growing wonder, and tears had begun to form in her violet eyes. I won't debate this, Vark, Daniel said firmly. I understand you meant this as a gift, but I can't accept a person as property. It goes against everything we believe here. Remove covering, Vark demanded, reaching toward Inara with one of his upper limbs. Restore proper presentation. Daniel stepped between them. No, she stays clothed. The standoff might have escalated further had Inara not spoken. Her voice soft but somehow different from before, less mechanical, more uncertain. This covering, she touched the tunic again. It feels safe. Both Daniel and Vark turned to her in surprise. Consent slaves were not programmed to express personal preferences, only to mirror their owner's desires. Vark clicked in alarm. Malfunction! Preference expressed without master prompt. Daniel watched Inara closely. Something was happening. Something beyond the expected behavior of a consent slave. The simple act of clothing her seemed to have triggered a glitch in her programming. Not malfunction, Daniel said quietly. Personhood. A warning chime sounded from Vark's translator device. Incoming communication from Galactic Consensus Enforcement. Vark's tone changed to one of formal deference as he received the message. Understood. Will comply. He turned to Daniel, his compound eyes unreadable. Authorities alerted to consent, slave irregularity. Retrieval team dispatched. Arrive within 2 planetary rotations. Property must be secured and prepared for evaluation. Daniel's mind raced. 2 days. 2 days before they would come to take Inara away. Reset her programming, or worse. She's not going anywhere, he said, surprising himself with the determination in his voice. Vark's mandibles clicked rapidly. Friend Daniel does not understand. Interference with consent slave programming is violation of Galactic Consensus Law. Penalties severe. Colony could face sanctions. I understand perfectly, Daniel replied. And I don't care. As the suns began to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, Daniel made a decision that would change everything. For himself, for Inara, and perhaps for Meridian Colony itself. Inara, he said gently, would you like to stay here? Not as a consent slave, but as a guest? As a person? Her violet eyes met his, confusion, and something like hope battling within them. I don't know how to be a person, she whispered. I think you already are, Daniel said. And if you'll let me, I'll help you discover that for yourself. Behind them, Vark watched in silent dismay as his perfect gift began the transformation into something he couldn't comprehend, a being with choice. The evening stretched into night as Daniel hastily prepared his modest living quarters, attached to the workshop for his unexpected guest. Vark had departed in obvious distress, his sense of honor and friendship at war with his cultural programming, not unlike Inara's own internal conflict. Daniel showed Inara to the small spare room where he usually stored parts and supplies. He'd cleared enough space for the cot he kept for the occasional late night of work. It's not much, he apologized, but it's yours. Your own space. Inara stood in the doorway, still clutching the tunic around herself as if afraid someone might take it away. Mine? She asked, the concept clearly foreign to her. Yes, yours to use as you wish. No one will enter without your permission. Permission, she repeated the word slowly, testing it. I can give or withhold permission. Daniel nodded, his heart aching at her wonder over such a basic right. Exactly. Your choice matters here. After ensuring she had what she needed for the night, Daniel retreated to his own room, his mind whirling with the implications of what he'd done. Defying the galactic consensus wasn't a small matter. They controlled trade routes, technological patents, and had overwhelming military superiority. Meridian's independence existed largely because the colony was too small and remote to bother with. Until now. Sleep eluded him as he stared at the ceiling, thinking of the retrieval team that would arrive in less than 2 days. What would they do? What could he do to stop them? The colony had no military, no defenses beyond the mountain passes that made approach difficult. They survived by being unremarkable, unworthy of notice. Around midnight, a soft sound pulled him from his troubled thoughts. Padding to his door, he found Inara standing in the hallway, moonlight from the small window illuminating her uncertain expression. I cannot sleep, she said simply. The silence in my mind, it's too loud. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. What do you mean? Her brow furrowed as she struggled to explain. Always before, there were commands, instructions, purposes. The voice of the biochip telling me what to feel, how to move, what to want. She touched her temple where the neural implant connected with her brain. Now there is space, emptiness. I don't know what to fill it with. That space, Daniel said gently, is where your own thoughts belong, your own desires and decisions. How will I know which thoughts are mine? Her voice trembled. What if I cannot generate them correctly? There's no correct way to think your own thoughts. Inara, that's what makes them yours. She considered this, her violet eyes reflecting the moonlight. May I ask something? Anything. Why did you cover me? No one has ever covered a consent slave before. Daniel chose his words carefully. Because I saw a person, not an object, and people deserve dignity. Dignity, she repeated, as if memorizing the word. Is that what this feels like? This new feeling when I wrap the fabric around myself? Perhaps that and the beginning of freedom. She nodded slowly. I would like to try having more thoughts now. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Inara. As she turned to go back to her room, Daniel noticed something. Her posture had changed, ever so slightly. Her shoulders were straighter, Her head held a fraction higher. Such a small change. But in it, he saw the first flicker of selfhood taking root. The next morning, Daniel woke to the smell of something burning. He rushed to the kitchen area to find Inara standing before the cooking unit, looking distressed as smoke rose from a pan. "I attempted to create morning sustenance," she explained, her voice tight with what might have been embarrassment. "The programming includes culinary skills. But you tried to do it your way instead of letting the biochip guide you." Daniel finished for her, opening a window to clear the smoke. She nodded, looking down at the blackened contents of the pan. "Failure resulted." "Not failure," Daniel corrected, taking the pan and scraping its contents into the waste unit. "Learning. There's a difference." He pulled out fresh ingredients from the cooling unit. "Here, we'll make breakfast together." As they worked side by side, Daniel showed her how to crack eggs and mix batter for pancakes. Her movements were initially hesitant, fighting against the fluid precision her programming wanted to impose. But with each small decision, how much batter to pour, when to flip the pancake, she seemed to grow more present in her own body. "You're fighting your programming," Daniel observed, as she deliberately chose to add berries to the pancake mix. Something she clearly decided for herself. "Yes," she admitted. "It hurts, like pressure behind my eyes." The biochip attempts to correct what it perceives as errors in judgment. "Is it worth the pain?" Daniel asked softly. Inara looked at the spatula in her hand, then at the unevenly cooked pancake in the pan. Her creation, not her programming's. "Yes," she said firmly. "It is worth it." After breakfast, Daniel took her to the workshop, explaining his current projects and the irrigation system he maintained for the colony. Inara listened intently, asking questions that grew increasingly complex and thoughtful as the morning progressed. By midday, Daniel knew he needed to seek help. The retrieval team would arrive tomorrow, and he had no plan beyond his determination to protect Inara. While she explored the workshop, examining tools and components with growing curiosity, Daniel made a secure call to Elder Sophia, the colony's unofficial leader. The elder's weathered face appeared on the small screen, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Daniel, this is unexpected. I need your counsel. Elder, I've complicated things for the colony." He explained the situation as concisely as possible. Vark's gift, Inara's emerging consciousness, and the impending arrival of consensus enforcers. Sophia's expression remained impassive, but her eyes hardened. "You've placed us all at risk. Daniel, the consensus could revoke our trading privileges, our access to medical supplies." "I know," he acknowledged. "But you should see her, Sophia. The programming is breaking down. She's becoming herself. Bring her to the council hall tonight." Sophia decided, after a long pause. "Mid-cycle, discreetly. The council should see this for themselves before we decide how to proceed." The transmission ended, leaving Daniel with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The council could decide to hand Inara over to preserve the colony's safety. He wouldn't blame them for that choice, but he knew he couldn't allow it. When he returned to the workshop, he found Inara sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by small mechanical parts she had organized into precise patterns. "The patterns help quiet the noise," she explained, seeing his questioning look. "When I create order of my own choosing, the biochip's demands recede." Daniel knelt beside her, examining the intricate arrangement. "You're creating a buffer between you and your programming." She nodded. "It is exhausting, but necessary." She looked up at him, her violet eyes clearer than before. "They're coming for me tomorrow, aren't they?" "Yes, but I won't let them take you." "Why?" she asked, her head tilting slightly. "Why risk yourself and your colony for me?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "Because freedom isn't just for those born with it. It belongs to everyone, including you. Inara's fingers traced the pattern she had created. I was engineered never to want freedom, to find fulfillment only in service and submission. She looked up, her expression troubled. What if that programming is too deep? What if, beneath these new thoughts, I am still just what they made me to be? We're all shaped by forces beyond our control, Daniel said. Born into cultures, raised with certain beliefs, influenced by experiences. But that doesn't mean we can't question, change, choose differently. He gestured to the pattern she had created. You made this, not your programming. She touched the rough fabric of the tunic she still wore, now secured with a belt Daniel had given her. And this choice, to remain covered? Also yours. Inara closed her eyes, seeming to look inward. There is pain when I resist the programming, but there is something else when I succeed. Something I have no word for. Pride, perhaps, or joy. Joy, she repeated, testing the word. Yes, perhaps that is it. As evening approached, Daniel provided Inara with more clothing, simple garments from the colony's communal stores. She selected each piece with deliberate care, her choices becoming more confident as she progressed. The simple tunic was supplemented with loose trousers, a woven belt, and a light jacket against the evening chill. How do I appear? She asked when she had finished dressing. Daniel smiled. Like a colonist, like one of us. Something like a smile flickered across her face. Not the practiced, seductive expression her programming would have produced, but something tentative and genuine. I would like that, she said softly. To be one of you. Under the cover of darkness, they made their way to the colony's central district. Meridian was small by any standard. Barely 5,000 inhabitants, living in dwellings carved into the mountainsides and built across the fertile valley floor. The council hall was the largest structure, serving as meeting place, court, and center of community life. Elder Sophia met them at a side entrance, her shrewd eyes immediately assessing Inara. Follow me, she said without preamble. The full council is assembled. The council chamber was a semicircular room with a vaulted ceiling, illuminated by soft bioluminescent panels. 7 elders sat at a curved table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Daniel recognized all of them. Meridian was too small for anonymity. Daniel Wren, Elder Thomas, a broad-shouldered man with a perpetually furrowed brow, spoke first. You've brought trouble to our doorstep. I've brought a person seeking asylum, Daniel corrected, his voice steady despite his nerves. A bioengineered consent slave is not legally a person under galactic consensus law, Elder Kai pointed out, adjusting his spectacles. The law recognizes them as sophisticated property. The law is wrong, Daniel stated simply. A murmur ran through the council. Such a direct challenge to consensus authority was rarely spoken aloud, even here on Meridian. Elder Sophia raised a hand for silence. Before we debate legalities, let us hear from the individual in question. She turned to Inara. Can you tell us your thoughts? Not what you're programmed to say, but what you actually think. Inara stepped forward, her movement still graceful but now containing small hesitations, evidence of her internal struggle against her programming. I am uncertain how to distinguish between programming and genuine thought, she began, her voice soft but clear. Until yesterday, there was no difference. I was what I was made to be, and I felt no conflict about that. She touched the sleeve of her jacket. Then came the covering. The simple act of being clothed created a barrier, not just physical, but mental. For the first time, I experienced the sensation of having a boundary, of being separate from the world around me. And in that separation, I found a space for thoughts that did not come from my programming. Elder Thomas leaned forward. Pretty words, but they proved nothing. The consensus engineers are clever. This could be an advanced simulation of autonomy, designed to create emotional attachment in the owner. It is not simulation, Inara said with sudden intensity. The simulation would not include pain. I feel pain when I resist the directives of the biochip. Physical pain. My creators would never design unnecessary suffering into their product. The word product hung in the air, its dehumanizing implication stark in the silence that followed. Can you prove this pain? Elder Kai asked skeptically. Inara closed her eyes, her face becoming a mask of concentration. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her hand to her head and removed a hairpin Daniel hadn't noticed before. The simple action shouldn't have been remarkable, but Daniel could see the trembling in her fingers, the beads of sweat forming on her brow. The biochip, she gasped, forbids any action that might cause harm to the physical asset. Removing hairpins is classified as potentially damaging to appearance optimization. She opened her eyes, which now shone with tears of pain and triumph. Yet I choose to remove it. Choose to remove. The small pin clutched in her shaking hand became somehow monumental, physical proof of will overcoming programming. Elder Sophia exchanged glances with the other council members. The retrieval team arrives tomorrow. What would you have us do, Daniel? Risk the welfare of 5,000 colonists for one individual? Before Daniel could respond, the council chamber door opened, and Vark entered. His exoskeleton seemed duller than usual, his movements less fluid. Friend Daniel, he clicked, his translator rendering his words flatly. Have searched everywhere. Hope to find you before departure. Departure? Daniel asked, confused. Am returning to homeworld, Vark explained. Cannot witness dishonor of gift rejection. Cannot participate in violation of consensus law. Inara stepped toward the alien, still clutching the hairpin. You brought me here as property, she said, her voice gentle despite the accusation. Would you leave me here as a person? Vark's compound eyes shifted between her and Daniel. Concept unclear. Consent slaves are not persons. Look at her, Vark, Daniel urged. Really look. She's fighting her programming right now. Choosing pain over compliance. Would property do that? Vark's antennae twitched in agitation. Malfunction. Requires repair. Not malfunction, Inara insisted. Evolution. Becoming. The council chamber fell silent as Vark studied Inara. His species' expressions were largely unreadable to humans. But Daniel had learned to interpret subtle shifts in posture and the positioning of his friend's limbs. Right now, Vark was experiencing deep confusion, perhaps even distress. If not property, Vark finally asked, then what is debt status? How is balance achieved between Daniel Friend and Vark? Daniel stepped forward and placed a hand on one of Vark's upper arms. Your friendship is enough, Vark. It always has been. The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly. Insufficient. Honor requires equivalence. Then help us, Daniel suggested. Help us protect Inara from the retrieval team. That would be a gift of equal value to what I did for you during the ion storm. Vark went very still, all 6 limbs freezing in place as he processed this proposal. Proposal creates new debt to consensus. Violates oath as traitor. It upholds a greater oath, Elder Sophia interjected. The oath to recognize truth when it stands before you. For long moments, no one spoke. Then, with deliberate movements, Vark reached into a compartment in his exoskeleton and withdrew a small device. Retrieval signal beacon, he explained. Standard protocol. Implanted in all consent slaves. Allows tracking and remote neural adjustment. He placed the device on the council table. Could be modified to transmit false location data. Daniel felt hope surge within him. You'd do that? Balance must be achieved, Vark stated, as if the answer were obvious. Friend Daniel values this being's autonomy equivalent to own life. Therefore, value is established. Elder Sophia rose from her seat. The council will deliberate. Daniel, take Inara and Vark to the preparation room. We will call you when we've reached a decision. As they waited in the small antechamber adjacent to the council hall, Daniel could see Inara's strength beginning to falter. The constant battle against her programming was taking a visible toll. You should rest, he told her gently. Conserve your energy. She shook her head. If I relax my guard, the programming reasserts control. I must remain vigilant. She looked at Vark, who stood awkwardly in the corner of the room. You created the beacon that tracks me? Negative, Vark responded. Hralvak do not create consent slave technology. We trade, exchange goods across systems. But you understand how it functions. Vark's antennae twitched. Basic principles only. Neural interface technology originated with Braxians. They guard secrets closely. Inara touched the back of her neck, where the biochip connected to her spinal column. Could it be removed? Fatal, Vark stated bluntly. Designed with terminal feedback loop, removal triggers massive neural cascade. Death results. Daniel felt a chill at the calculated cruelty of such a design. They built you with a kill switch, he said quietly to Inara. Of course, she replied, her voice strangely calm. Valuable property must be secured against theft. The door opened before Daniel could respond, and Elder Sophia gestured for them to return to the chamber. The council members' faces were grave. We have reached a decision, Sophia announced. The colony cannot openly defy the galactic consensus without risking severe repercussions for all our citizens. Therefore, officially, we will cooperate with the retrieval team. Daniel's heart sank, but Sophia raised a hand to forestall his objection. Unofficially, she continued, we recognize the emergence of personhood in Inara and acknowledge our moral obligation to protect her autonomy. We will assist in modifying the tracking beacon to misdirect the retrieval team, while you, Daniel, take Inara to the southern caves. A small group of trusted colonists will help you establish a hidden sanctuary there. Relief washed over Daniel. Thank you, Elder. Thank you all. Do not thank us yet, Elder Thomas warned. This path carries great risk. If discovered, the consequences would be severe. Sometimes principles must outweigh prudence, Sophia said firmly. We are human precisely because we can recognize humanity in others, even when those others were designed to seem less than human. The remainder of the night was a flurry of activity. Vark worked with the colony's best technicians to modify the tracking beacon, using his knowledge of consensus protocols to create a false signal that would lead the retrieval team to an abandoned mining outpost 50 kilometers to the north. Meanwhile, Daniel gathered supplies and made preparations for the journey to the southern caves. The complex network of caverns had been mapped by the first generation of colonists, but was rarely visited now. Its remote location and treacherous approach made it ideal for a hidden sanctuary. As dawn approached, Inara's condition worsened. The prolonged resistance to her programming had left her feverish and disoriented. When the medical technician examined her, his diagnosis was grim. The biochip is increasing neural pressure to force compliance, he explained to Daniel. It's an automated response to sustained resistance. If she continues fighting it at this intensity, she risks permanent brain damage. What can we do? Daniel asked, watching as Inara tossed restlessly on the cot where they had laid her. I can administer a neural buffer. It's what we use for patients with traumatic brain injuries. It won't stop the biochip, but it might create enough insulation to reduce the pain and pressure. The treatment helped stabilize Inara's condition, but she remained weak and feverish. The plan to leave for the caves immediately had to be delayed. We need a diversion, Elder Sophia decided. Something to occupy the retrieval team while Inara recovers enough for travel. Public confrontation, Vark suggested unexpectedly. All eyes turned to him. Retrieval team expects resistance from Daniel Friend. We'll focus resources on visible target. You mean use me as bait, Daniel realized. Vark's mandibles clicked in affirmation. while true escape occurs elsewhere. The strategy was dangerous but sound. Daniel would make a very public appearance at the colony's tavern, making no secret of his opposition to the consensus laws. The retrieval team, upon arrival, would inevitably focus their attention there first. "I'll do it," Daniel agreed. "But who will take Inara to the caves?" "I will," said a voice from the doorway. It was Mira, one of the colony's best scouts and Daniel's childhood friend. "The southern pass is treacherous for those who don't know it. I can get her through safely." As the plan took shape, Daniel spent the remaining hours of the morning at Inara's side. Her fever had begun to recede, and periods of lucidity alternated with confused muttering. During one clear moment, she gripped his hand with surprising strength. "If I lose myself," she whispered. "If the programming wins." "It won't," Daniel assured her. "But if it does," she insisted, "promise you won't let them take me. Better to be no one than to be a thing again." Daniel squeezed her hand. "You won't lose yourself, and I promise, whatever happens, you'll never be a thing again." By midday, lookouts reported an approaching vessel bearing consensus markings. The retrieval team had arrived ahead of schedule. There was no more time for preparation. Daniel said a hurried goodbye to Inara, who was now awake but still weak. "Mira will take you to safety. I'll join you as soon as I can." Inara caught his arm as he turned to leave. "Daniel, thank you for the covering, for seeing me." "Thank you for becoming you," he replied softly. "That took more courage than anything I've ever done." He left quickly, not looking back, knowing that if he hesitated, he might lose his resolve. The colony's tavern, the Distant Star, was already busy when he arrived. Word had spread quickly about the consensus vessel's arrival, and colonists had gathered to exchange rumors and speculations. Daniel took a prominent seat at the bar and ordered a drink. He made no attempt to be subtle about his presence, engaging loudly in conversation with those nearby. It wasn't long before the tavern's door swung open to reveal three figures in the distinctive gray uniforms of consensus enforcement. The lead officer, a tall woman with a cybernetic eye enhancement, scanned the room before focusing on Daniel. "Daniel Wren," she stated, rather than asked. "You are in possession of consensus property designation, Inara 7293. You will surrender this property immediately." The tavern fell silent as Daniel turned to face her. "I don't have any property of yours," he said clearly. "I know only free people." The officer's expression didn't change. "Obstructing a retrieval operation is a violation of Consensus Statute 342. Penalties include colonial sanctions and personal incarceration." Daniel took a deliberate sip of his drink. "Interesting. And what statute covers the enslavement of sentient beings?" "Consent slaves are not classified as sentient under consensus law," the officer recited mechanically. "They are purpose-designed service units with simulated responsiveness." "Simulated?" Daniel stood, addressing the now silent tavern as much as the officers. "Is pain a simulation? Is the struggle for self-determination a program function?" He pulled a small, holographic projector from his pocket, a device Vark had helped him prepare earlier. Activating it, he displayed a recording of Inara from the council chamber, fighting through pain to remove the hairpin. The image was stark in its simplicity. A young woman performing a minor action with extraordinary effort, tears streaming down her face. "Does this look like simulation to you?" Daniel challenged. "Or does it look like a person fighting for the right to make even the smallest choice for herself?" Murmurs spread through the tavern as colonists watched the recording. The officer's cybernetic eye whirred as she analyzed the footage. "Neural malfunction," she declared. "The unit requires recalibration." "The woman requires freedom," Daniel countered. "And she has it now. She's gone beyond your reach." This was the dangerous part of the plan, claiming Inara's escape before she had actually reached safety. But it was necessary to focus the retrieval team's attention fully on Daniel. The officer tapped a device on her wrist, presumably checking the tracking beacon signal. Your claim is false. The unit's locator beacon is active and approaching the northern outpost. A second team has already been dispatched to that location. Daniel feigned dismay, hoping his acting skills were convincing enough. No, that's not possible. Resistance is futile and irrational, the officer stated flatly. You will accompany us for questioning regarding potential accomplices. As two of the officers moved to flank Daniel, an unexpected voice rang out from the back of the tavern. He's not going anywhere with you. The crowd parted to reveal Elder Sophia, her diminutive frame somehow commanding in the tense atmosphere. Behind her stood several other council members and a dozen colonists. This is a colony matter, Sophia continued, approaching with steady steps. Under the Charter of Colonial Independence, we retain jurisdiction over our citizens in our territory. The officer's expression hardened. Charter privileges are contingent upon compliance with consensus core statutes. Harboring or assisting in the theft of registered property constitutes a violation of those statutes. Interesting perspective, Sophia replied, her voice deceptively mild. Perhaps we should discuss charter law and the precise definition of property as it applies to sentient beings. I'm sure the Interstellar Rights Commission would be fascinated by the case. The mention of the Commission, a largely symbolic but occasionally influential body that monitored rights abuses across systems, caused a flicker of hesitation in the officer's demeanor. Such discussions are irrelevant, she said finally. We will retrieve the property and restore proper function. And if the property chooses death over recapture, Daniel asked quietly, what then? The question hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone present. The officer's cybernetic eye whirred again. Processing. Self-termination protocols are hardwired to fail, she stated. The unit cannot choose death. She's finding ways around all sorts of protocols, Daniel countered. Amazing what determination can accomplish. A commotion at the tavern entrance interrupted the standoff. Vark pushed his way through the crowd, his exoskeleton gleaming under the tavern lights. Officer DeSanto, he clicked, his translator rendering his speech with unusual formality. Hralvak Trade Guild offers formal protest against retrieval operation. The officer, DeSanto, turned to face him, genuine surprise breaking through her professional facade. On what grounds does the guild involve itself in a standard retrieval? Property in question was Hralvak brokered gift, Vark explained. Under gift exchange protocol of Galactic Trade Agreement, recipient has right of gift transformation. Daniel had no idea what Vark was talking about, but he recognized his friend's strategy, using the consensus's own complex web of laws and protocols against it. Gift transformation does not apply to sentient property transfers, DeSanto argued, though with less certainty than before. Recent precedent contradicts, Vark countered, producing a data crystal from one of his utility arms. Judgment of Trade Arbitration Council, Case Designation Proxima 349. Transfer recipient transformed living gift into different function. Ruling upheld recipient rights. DeSanto took the crystal, her cybernetic eye scanning its contents rapidly. This case involved a biomechanical pet conversion, not a consent slave. Precedent established principle, Vark insisted. Function of gift may be altered by recipient according to cultural practice of recipient's society. He gestured to the colonists around them. Meridian cultural practice rejects consent slave designation. Transformation of status is legitimate under trade protocols. The legal argument was tenuous at best, but it introduced enough ambiguity to create hesitation. While the retrieval team processed this new complexity, Daniel noticed a subtle signal from Elder Kai at the window. 3 taps on the glass. The prearranged sign that Inara and Mira had successfully left the colony. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by a renewed determination. Now he needed to buy more time, to ensure the false beacon kept the second retrieval team chasing shadows to the north, while Inara made her way south. I propose arbitration, Daniel said suddenly. As is my right under Section 12 of the Colonial Charter. DeSanto's expression hardened again. Arbitration applies to disputes between colonial citizens, not consensus enforcement actions. Actually, Elder Sophia interjected smoothly, the full text of Section 12 extends arbitration rights to any dispute affecting the welfare and sovereignty of the colony and its inhabitants. As our council has formally recognized Inara as an asylum seeker under our protection, this qualifies. The legal quagmire was deepening with each passing moment. Daniel could see frustration building in DeSanto's posture, her cybernetic eye rapidly shifting as she presumably consulted remote databases or superiors. Enough, she said finally. These delaying tactics are transparent and futile. We will proceed with the retrieval operation with or without your cooperation. She turned to leave, gesturing for her officers to follow. When the tavern door burst open once more, a wild-eyed colonist Daniel recognized as one of the communication technicians rushed in. The consensus ship, he gasped. It's powering weapon systems. They're targeting the southern ridge. Daniel's blood ran cold. The southern ridge, exactly where Inara and Mira would be crossing right now. The second retrieval team must have detected the deception and traced the real location of Inara's biochip. Without thinking, he bolted for the door, shouldering past officers and colonists alike. He had to reach them, had to warn them somehow. But even as he ran into the street, he knew he would be too late. The ridge was nearly 2 kilometers from the colony center, across difficult terrain. A shadow fell over the street as the consensus vessel moved into position overhead, its sleek hull reflecting the afternoon sunlight. Daniel could see the weapon ports opening, energy building with a distinctive blue glow. No, he shouted uselessly at the sky. She's a person. You can't do this. The ship hung motionless for a long, terrible moment. Then, without warning, the weapons ports closed, and the vessel began to ascend rapidly. Confusion replaced Daniel's panic. What had happened? Why had they aborted the attack? His answer came in the form of Vark, who emerged from the tavern with surprising speed for his ungainly form. Transmission sent, the alien explained, mandibles clicking rapidly in what Daniel now recognized as excitement. To Consensus Command, recording of Inara's resistance, evidence of sentience. You think that stopped them? Daniel asked incredulously. Not alone, Vark admitted. Also, transmitted data packet to all major news networks in 3 systems. Consensus prefers avoiding public relations difficulties. Understanding dawned. The Consensus operated largely in shadows, its practices officially sanctioned, but rarely discussed in polite society. Public exposure, especially with compelling evidence of sentience in their products, would create exactly the kind of scrutiny they avoided. The reprieve might be temporary, but it created an opportunity. Daniel turned to the gathered colonists, who had followed the drama into the street. We need to reach the southern ridge, he announced. Immediately. What followed was a hastily organized rescue expedition. 12 colonists, led by Daniel and Vark, set out for the ridge at a grueling pace. The terrain was rough, with loose shale and scrubby vegetation making footing treacherous. They were halfway to the ridge when the storm hit. A sudden, violent onslaught of wind and rain that reduced visibility to mere meters. Meridian's weather was notoriously unpredictable, with storm systems forming and dissipating with little warning. This one seemed particularly ill-timed. We have to keep moving, Daniel shouted over the howling wind. Mira and Inara will be exposed up there. The group pressed on, fighting against the elements. The rain turned the path to mud, making each step a struggle. Lightning flashed overhead, momentarily illuminating the forbidding ridge that loomed before them. It was Vark who spotted them first, his compound eyes better suited to penetrating the gloom. There, he clicked, pointing with 2 of his upper limbs. Movement on ledge. Daniel squinted through the rain and could just make out 2 figures, huddled under an outcropping, one supporting the other. Relief surged through him, followed immediately by renewed urgency. They're trapped, he realized. That ledge narrows to nothing another 50 meters along. They can't go forward. And in this weather, they can't safely backtrack. The rescue became a technical challenge, using climbing equipment hastily brought from the colony. Daniel and two others with mountain experience began ascending toward the ledge. The wet rock made the climb treacherous, hand and footholds slippery and uncertain. When Daniel finally pulled himself onto the ledge, he found Mira sheltering Inara with her own body, using her pack as additional protection against the driving rain. "Daniel!" Mira's face showed equal parts relief and concern. "The ship. We saw it overhead. We thought—" "I know," he cut her off, moving to examine Inara. "Are you hurt?" Inara looked up at him, her violet eyes bright with fever, but clear and present. "The biochip," she said weakly. "It's fighting harder now, sending pain everywhere." Daniel helped her to a sitting position. "We'll get you down from here. The others are setting up a harness system." "No time," she gasped, clutching her head. "Something's happening. The chip is changing tactics." Alarm shot through Daniel. "What do you mean?" "Instead of pain, pleasure. Overwhelming. When I comply." Her words came in short bursts between labored breaths. "Trying to make me want to return. To give in." The insidious brilliance of the programming struck Daniel anew. Of course, the biochip would have multiple approaches to ensure compliance. Pain was just one method. Pleasure, addictive, overwhelming pleasure, would be another. "Fight it," he urged her. "Remember who you are becoming." "I'm trying," she whispered. "But it feels so right. To give in." Her expression shifted subtly, the struggle visible in every line of her face. "The clothes, they help. Remind me of the boundary, of being separate from the programming." Daniel took off his jacket, soaked as it was, and wrapped it around her shoulders, adding another layer of symbolic protection. Hold on to that feeling, the feeling of choice. The storm continued to rage as they worked to secure Inara in the harness. Mira went down first, then helped guide Inara's descent from below. Daniel followed last, keeping a watchful eye on the sky for any sign of the consensus vessel returning. By the time they reached the ground, Inara's condition had deteriorated further. The combination of fever, neural pressure from the biochip, and physical exhaustion had left her barely conscious. They fashioned a stretcher and began the slow journey back to the colony, the storm gradually abating as they progressed. When they reached the outskirts of Meridian, they were met by Elder Sophia and Dr. Eliza, the colony's chief medical officer. "Bring her to the medical center," Dr. Eliza instructed, after a quick assessment. "We need to stabilize her condition before you can move on to the sanctuary." The medical center was a modest facility by consensus standards, but represented the best healthcare available on Meridian. Dr. Eliza worked quickly, administering neural buffers and temperature regulators to address Inara's immediate symptoms. "The biochip is escalating its control protocols," she explained to Daniel as they watched Inara sleep fitfully. "It's designed with multiple redundancies and strategies to maintain compliance. Her resistance is unprecedented, but it's taking a severe physical toll." "Can you remove it?" Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. Dr. Eliza shook her head. "Vark was right about the kill switch. The biochip is integrated with her central nervous system. Removal would cause catastrophic neural collapse." "So what can we do?" The doctor's expression was grim. "Keep fighting, one day at a time. The buffer treatments help, but they're not a permanent solution. Eventually, her system will adapt, and they'll become less effective." Daniel sat heavily in the chair beside Inara's bed. "She can't spend her life in constant battle with her own mind." "Perhaps she won't have to," said a voice from the doorway. Vark entered, followed by Elder Sophia. Explain, Daniel demanded, too exhausted for pleasantries. Consensus vessel departed system, Vark reported. Official explanation cites technical malfunction in consent slave unit requiring specialized facility for repair. Translation: They're saving face. Sophia added, publicly, they're claiming the retrieval was abandoned due to a defect in the product, not because the product demonstrated personhood. That buys us time, Daniel acknowledged. But it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. Solution may exist, Vark said, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Not removal of biochip, reprogramming. Dr. Eliza looked skeptical. The consensus guards their programming protocols zealously. No one outside their inner circle knows how to access the biochip's code. Not entirely accurate, Vark countered. Hralvak Trade Guild maintains extensive database of all technologies traded through our networks. Security measure against malfunctions affecting trade reputation. Hope flickered in Daniel's chest. You have information on how the biochips work? Partial schematics only, Vark clarified. Not complete access protocols, but perhaps sufficient for talented programmer to exploit vulnerabilities. Dr. Eliza was already nodding slowly. Aylin, she said. We need Aylin. Aylin Zhang was Meridian's resident programming genius, responsible for maintaining the colony's communication systems and security protocols. If anyone could make sense of partial schematics and find exploitable weaknesses, it would be her. By morning, Aylin had set up a makeshift laboratory adjacent to the medical center. Her workspace was a chaotic arrangement of screens, processors, and specialized neural interfaces. Vark provided the schematics he'd managed to access through the Trade Guild's secure channels, and Aylin immersed herself in the complex code structures. Inara drifted in and out of consciousness throughout the day. During her lucid periods, Daniel sat with her, reading aloud from colony records and histories, stories of Meridian's founding and the principles that had guided its development. She listened intently, as if gathering these narratives into herself, building a context for her emerging identity. These people left everything behind for freedom, she observed quietly, after a story about the first generation of colonists. As I am trying to do. Yes, Daniel agreed. Freedom has always been worth fighting for. Even when it hurts? Especially then. 3 days passed in this manner. Aylin working tirelessly on the biochip's programming while Daniel, Dr. Eliza, and a rotating crew of volunteers monitored Inara's condition. The neural buffers continued to provide relief, though as predicted, their effectiveness began to wane as her system adapted. On the morning of the 4th day, Aylin emerged from her laboratory, bleary-eyed but triumphant. I found it, she announced without preamble. A back door in the compliance subroutines. It's meant for emergency shutdown in case of critical malfunction. But I think I can repurpose it. To do what exactly? Dr. Eliza asked cautiously. Not to remove the biochip. That's still impossible without triggering the kill switch. But I can insert a filter subroutine that would intercept the compliance commands before they reach her conscious mind. A barrier, Daniel realized. Like the clothes, but inside her mind. Aylin nodded. Exactly. The biochip would still function, still send its signals, but they'd be redirected into a closed loop, never reaching their target. Risks? Dr. Eliza asked bluntly. Aylin's expression sobered. Significant. We'd be repurposing highly secure consensus technology with incomplete information. Best case, it works perfectly. Worst case. She didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood that failure could mean Inara's death. It should be her choice, Daniel said firmly. When she's lucid enough to understand what we're proposing. They didn't have to wait long. By afternoon, Inara had another period of clarity, her fever temporarily receding. Daniel and Aylin explained the potential solution and its risks as simply and honestly as they could. Inara listened silently, her violet eyes moving between them as they spoke. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "If it fails," she finally asked, "will death be quick?" The directness of the question startled Daniel, but Aylin nodded. "Yes, neural cascade is almost instantaneous. You wouldn't suffer. And if it succeeds, the biochip would still be present, still physically connected to your nervous system," Aylin explained. "But its commands would never reach you. You would be free to think your own thoughts, make your own choices, without constant internal opposition." Inara closed her eyes, seeming to look inward. "The voice inside that isn't mine. It would be silenced." "That's the goal," Aylin confirmed. "Then proceed," Inara said, opening her eyes with new resolve. "I choose this risk." The procedure was scheduled for that evening. The medical center was cleared of all non-essential personnel, with only Dr. Eliza, Aylin, Daniel, and Vark remaining. The alien had insisted on being present, his sense of honor demanding he witness the outcome of his gift. Aylin's equipment was connected to the neural access port at the base of Inara's skull, a small, almost invisible interface the biochip used for maintenance and updates. The process would involve uploading the filter subroutine directly into the biochip's command structure, then triggering a soft reset that would incorporate the new code. "Once I begin," Aylin warned, "there's no stopping until it's complete. The biochip will detect the intrusion and attempt to lock down its systems. We'll have approximately 40 seconds to upload the complete filter routine before it succeeds." Inara lay face down on the medical bed, her auburn hair carefully secured away from the access port. "I'm ready," she said, her voice muffled but steady. Daniel took her hand. "I'll be right here." The room fell silent as Aylin initiated the upload sequence. On her screens, complex code scrolled rapidly, a digital battle playing out in microseconds. Inara's body tensed, her hand gripping Daniel's with surprising strength. "It's fighting back," Aylin muttered, fingers flying across her interface. "Adaptive countermeasures. Rerouting." The seconds stretched agonizingly. Inara's breathing became shallow, her body rigid with tension. A warning tone sounded from Dr. Eliza's monitors. "Heart rate critical," she reported tensely. "Neural activity spiking across all regions." "Almost there," Aylin said through gritted teeth. "Just need to lock the sequence." A final cascade of code flowed across her screen, followed by a single pulsing command prompt. "Reset YN." Aylin looked at Daniel, who squeezed Inara's hand gently. "Inara, last chance to stop." Her response was barely audible but unmistakable. "Freedom. Choose freedom." Aylin pressed the command. "Why?" For one terrible moment. Nothing happened. Inara's body went completely still, not even breathing. The medical monitors flatlined with a sustained, horrifying tone. Dr. Eliza moved forward, emergency resuscitation equipment ready. Then, with a sudden gasp, Inara's body arched upward. Her eyes flew open, pupils dilated fully, obscuring the violet irises. The monitors erupted in a cacophony of alerts as her vital signs spiked erratically. "Neural cascade!" Dr. Eliza shouted, rushing forward. But before she could intervene, the chaos on the monitors began to stabilize. Inara's breathing settled into a steady rhythm, her heart rate decreasing to normal parameters. Her body relaxed gradually, the tension flowing out of her muscles. And then, incredibly, she smiled. "It's quiet," she whispered. "For the first time since I can remember. It's quiet in my mind." Aylin checked her readings, disbelief and triumph warring on her face. "The filter is holding. Biochip signals are being rerouted into the closed loop. They're never reaching her conscious mind." Daniel helped Inara to sit up slowly. "How do you feel?" She touched her temple, then her chest, as if taking inventory of her own body. "Like myself. Only myself." Her violet eyes filled with tears. I didn't know who that was until this moment. Vark, who had remained motionless throughout the procedure, now stepped forward. His alien features were unreadable, but his posture conveyed something like reverence. Transformation complete. He clicked softly. Gift has become person. Debt is balanced. The weeks that followed brought rapid changes, although the immediate crisis had passed. Daniel and the council agreed it would be safer for Inara to remain officially missing. The consensus had withdrawn their retrieval team, but there was no guarantee they wouldn't return with greater forces if they learned of her continued presence on Meridian. The southern cave system became not just Inara's sanctuary, but a symbol of possibility. Word spread quietly through underground networks of a consent slave who had broken her programming, who had chosen freedom over compliance. Others began to arrive. First a trickle, then a steady stream of consent slaves who had been abandoned due to malfunctions or escaped during transport. Aylin refined her filter subroutine with each new arrival, adapting it to the subtle variations in biochip design. Not every procedure was successful. There were losses that weighed heavily on all involved. But for those who survived, the transformation was profound. Daniel visited the sanctuary regularly, bringing supplies and news from the colony. With each visit, he found Inara changed, more confident, more fully herself. She had taken on a leadership role among the refugees, using her own experience to help others navigate the disorienting transition to autonomy. On one such visit, 6 months after her arrival in Meridian, Daniel found Inara in what had become the sanctuary's central chamber, a natural cavern expanded by careful excavation. It now housed a communal gathering space and what appeared to be a workshop. Inara sat with 5 other former consent slaves, fabric spread across their laps, needles flashing in the light of bioluminescent panels. "Daniel!" She set aside her work and embraced him warmly. "Right on schedule." "The council sends supplies and news," he said, setting down his pack. "Elder Sophia asked me to tell you that the consensus has officially classified you as decommissioned due to critical malfunction. They've written off the entire batch with your genetic sequence as defective." Inara smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "How convenient for us. That's 17 more potential refugees we can help if they find their way here." Daniel gestured to the sewing circle. "New project?" "The most important one," she said, leading him to the group. "Everyone, this is Daniel, the one I told you about." 5 pairs of eyes, in various unnatural colors that marked their engineered origins, looked up at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to reverence. "Daniel, these are our newest arrivals. They've all undergone the filter procedure successfully, but they're still early in their transition to selfhood." She picked up a piece of fabric, a half-completed tunic similar to the one he had first given her. "We've found that creating our own clothing helps establish that sense of boundary between self and programming. Each stitch is a choice, a small act of creation that belongs only to us." One of the newcomers, a young man with unnaturally golden eyes, held up his work, uneven stitches forming a simple vest. "I chose the color," he said, with the wonder of someone making his first independent decision. "No one told me which to use. I just liked this one." Daniel watched as Inara moved among them, offering gentle guidance and encouragement. She had transformed from the blank-eyed, passive being Vark had presented in his workshop into a woman of purpose and compassion. Her movements were entirely her own now, containing none of the artificial grace of her programming, but instead a natural dignity that came from self-possession. Later, as they walked along one of the underground streams that provided the sanctuary with fresh water, Daniel asked the question that had been on his mind. "Are you happy, Inara?" She considered the question carefully, in the thoughtful way she approached everything now. "Happy is too simple a word for what I feel. I am alive, truly alive, perhaps for the first time." She touched the fabric of her tunic, one she had made herself, embroidered with intricate patterns of her own design. Every choice is a discovery. Every day contains new thoughts that are mine alone. She stopped, turning to face him directly. But there is more work to do. There are thousands like me throughout the galaxy, living as things rather than people. They deserve the chance I was given. That's dangerous territory, Daniel cautioned. The consensus won't ignore a widespread rebellion among their products. Perhaps not, she agreed. But change never comes without risk. The first step is helping those who find their way to us. The next, well, that's still taking shape. As they continued their walk, Inara spoke of her plans for expanding the sanctuary, of creating a true community for those transitioning from slavery to personhood. Her vision was both practical and profound, a place where former consent slaves could not only find safety, but discover who they might become when freed from their programming. Vark visits sometimes, she mentioned, surprising Daniel. He's become quite the philosopher, questioning all sorts of Hralvak traditions now. Really? I haven't seen him in months. I assumed he'd returned to his trade routes. Inara smiled. He's been busy establishing discrete transport protocols for bringing refugees to Meridian. Apparently, his understanding of balanced debt has expanded considerably. The image of the formal, protocol-obsessed alien smuggling escaped consent slaves across star systems made Daniel laugh. People can change, I suppose. People can, Inara agreed, emphasizing the word, when given the choice. As the twin suns began to set, painting the sky visible through a high crevice in shades of amber and violet, Daniel prepared to return to the colony. Inara walked with him to the sanctuary's hidden entrance, where the path wound discreetly down to the valley floor. "Will you come to the colony sometime?" he asked. "It's safe enough for short visits now. People would like to meet you, the real you." She gazed out at the darkening valley, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps soon. There's still so much to learn about myself, about what it means to be free. But I'd like that. I think." As Daniel began his descent, Inara called after him one last time. "Daniel, thank you, for the covering, for everything that followed." He looked back up at her, silhouetted against the last light of day, clothed in garments of her own making. "Thank you for becoming yourself," he replied, echoing the words he had said to her months ago. It was always the most valuable gift. She remained at the entrance until he disappeared from view, then turned back to the sanctuary where others waited. Others who were just beginning the journey she had started when a simple tunic had awakened her to the possibility of choice. With each stitch they sewed, with each decision they made, a quiet revolution took shape, one person at a time, choosing freedom.